Hello there and welcome to an all-new episode of the Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Craig Telfer and right now I am joined by my close associate Shaughan McGuigan.
Hello there.
And you know what happens when the Princess Eugenie and Princess Beatrice of the Terrace get together? That is right, we are going to try to comprehend what the hell our father was doing in that awful island. And then, when we finally come to terms with it all, we'll talk about some lower league Scottish football.
They're still reasonably close to the top of the what do you call it? Like if you become king or queen?
Yeah, the crown. They are. If Wikipedia's right, I think Princess Eugenie is 13th in line
to the throne. Yeah, quite close. I actually thought they were a bit higher than that.
I don't know much about the royals. I'm a bit of a Republican. I think that we should perhaps abolish the monarchy, although it's not something that keeps me awake every night.
They're struggling for strength and depth, put it that way, the monarchy.
Very much like some of the teams that we're going to be talking on today's podcast. It's a brilliant segue, Shaughan. Fantastic. You should be hosting, not me. But yes, Shaughan and I, we have a lot to get through. We are going to be exploring one game from the Championship, another match from League One, and a third and final fixture from League Two, and we will discuss anything else that might have caught our eye. Now, full disclosure, because of some personal reasons, not really appropriate to get into right now, we're recording this podcast on a Tuesday evening rather than a Wednesday. Now, there are some games taking place in the Championship and in League Two that will likely supersede some of the points we'll be discussing, but nevertheless, I hope that doesn't deter you from listening to and enjoying the show. So if you're sticking this on a Thursday afternoon, you're raging that we've got a league placement incorrect, for instance, we can only apologise, but that's what happens when you let love get in the way of podcasting, isn't it?
I mean, the reason is I'm going to Airdrie versus Wraith Rovers in the Challenge Cup semi-final on Sunday evening. I suppose
Wednesday
I do love
evening.
Wraith Rovers.
I wish you were going on Sunday evening. That would be a lot more convenient.
Wednesday evening.
That's it. I mean, you should have kept it for personal reasons that aren't appropriate to discuss. That sounds a bit more mysterious, a bit more intriguing. But no, Shaughan's absolutely correct. Yes, it's the KDM Evolution Trophy semi-final. And to be fair, that's a very winnable competition for the Wraith Rovers. So why not? Why not go and see that?
It is winnable, but I do suspect that it'll finish 0-0 and then we'll lose on penalties. But we'll see.
Listen, you've got to give it a go. Before we get started, Shaughan, is everything okay with you since we caught up last week?
Yes, I'm very well. How are you?
Okay, mate. Okay. I have, because of my sore leg, I think I spoke about this a couple of weeks ago, I've had to start taking the bus into town. I was in the bus yesterday and I got a message on Instagram. It was a message request. I looked at it and somebody said, "Are you in the number 41 bus?" So the call was coming from inside the house. I chose not to reply to it because I thought that really is a bit weird.
I mean, maybe they saw you from the outside. Maybe they were on the pavement as you drove past. It wasn't that they were necessarily sat behind you.
They could well have been. I have seen the starters scream. I know exactly what happens to poor Drew Barrymore. I do not want the same thing to happen to me.
I suppose you could have answered after you got off the bus to give yourself that kind of extra layer of security.
Yeah, or I could have just kept it to myself and not revealed it on a podcast that's listened to by tens of people. But that's sadly, that is the cross I have to bear. Other than that, Shaughan, nothing interesting has happened to me.
Is your leg getting better?
Nah, it's a sciatic problem. I don't want to get too bogged down in it, but basically the sciatic nerve problems that I've had for about half my life, it was all concentrated down the left-hand side of my body. For some inexplicable reason, it's now moved into the right side of my body. So I think my body's trying to readjust to how it operates. So it's just painful, and that means I can't walk. I like walking everywhere because they just like living in Glasgow, it's class just walking around. It's great to do, and now I can't do that. So I think that last year was probably the last time in my life I'll be able to do the Glasgow Big Football Walking Challenge, which is a real shame.
Well, I mean, at least you've got a new friend that can chum you on the bus.
Yeah,
now you have to get it.
That's great. Now, in fact, that's brilliant. Now I can never use the bus again. So that's brilliant. Going to get Ubers everywhere. It's going to cost me an absolute fortune to go from A to B. Fantastic. Now, Shaughan, before we get started, I'm afraid we do have to go with corrections and clarifications and addendums. Following on from a discussion we had a couple of weeks ago about defenders who have moved further forward as their career progressed, I saw a tweet on Monday night from Copa90. It said, shout out to Matthias Zukowski, FC Magdeburg's right back, who has moved up front and has scored 11 goals in 11 games since then. It's got absolutely nothing to do with Scottish football, but it does have everything to do with a conversation that our listeners will have long forgotten about.
Yeah, I mean, that's fair enough, but as you say, probably not necessarily vital to a lower league Scottish football podcast.
And sticking off things that aren't necessarily related to a lower league Scottish football podcast, we have to discuss our sponsor of this week's show, Saely. Saely is an eSIM app that gives you affordable mobile data in over 200 destinations worldwide. It's perfect for any fan taking a city break in the coming weeks, or if you're one of those Scotland fans who likes to get over to Italy to see the likes of Scott McTominay and Kieran Bowie in action. For whatever reason you want to travel outside the UK and stay connected through your phone, Saely can help you greatly reduce or even eliminate roaming fees. No waiting in queues at the airport to get a local SIM, no faffing about with tiny bits of plastic. You just download the app, choose your destination, pick a data plan and activate it within minutes. And it has security features which enable you to browse away from home with greater web protection.
So actually, this does sound quite beneficial to me. Maybe something I would look into. So you've mentioned going abroad and seeing Scott McTominay. See, when I went to Naples, like especially the Spanish Quarter, it's like a rabbit warren, and like you're ultimately relying on your phone to find anything. But the thing that took ages to find, even when you kind of knew where it was on your phone, was, you know, the Scott McTominay mural.
Yes.
That kind of popped up in kind of the Scottish media. I was quite keen to find it. However, it is very much in the kind of the back of beyond. So it took us about an hour and a half to find it. And ultimately, using your kind of like your 5G on your phone, it probably would have been cheaper to hire somebody local to paint a new mural just where I was standing. So yes, that does sound like that might be something that would be beneficial to me going forward.
Excellent, Shaughan. Well, next time you are in Naples or, I don't know, Cambodia, wherever you take your holidays, you could download the Saely app in store or by scanning the QR code, which is appearing on screen right now. Use the code TerracePod at the checkout to get 15% off your first purchase. The details are in the podcast episode description box. That's use code TerracePod at the checkout to get 15% off your first full purchase. Anyway, Shaughan, enough about sucking at the teat of our corporate overlords. Let's get stuck into the footy. And we will start this podcast properly by looking at one of the more eye-catching results from the weekend, and that is Arbroath's 4-2 victory over Dunfermline Athletic at Gayfield. Bear with me as I go through the scorers from this one because there is quite a lot to explain. Ryan Dow gave the home side an early lead, but it was cancelled out by Andy Taw's deflected effort shortly afterwards. Aaron Muirhead put Arbroath back in front not long after the interval, and Dennis Mehmet's catastrophic own goal gave them a 2-goal lead. Josh Cooper did pull one back with a lovely low finish, but Finlay Marshall made sure of the win at the death, and for good measure, Jacob McIntyre was sent off in injury time after collecting a second booking. Arbroath's outstanding season continues. They have consolidated third place with 40 points, effectively the magic number for all teams looking to survive. But this loss, it was Dunfermline's third consecutive league defeat, and as of recording, they're in 7th place with 29 points, but they're playing Partick Thistle on Tuesday night, so that could well change by the time this is published. Shaughan, the world and I would like to know what you made of Arbroath 4, Dunfermline Athletic 2, please.
I mean, it looked like a really good game. First of all, that's the first point. I think in terms of Arbroath, it wasn't necessarily a win that they badly needed. However, like if you go back to they hadn't actually won a game since they defeated Wraith 3-2 at Starks Park. So I think that was like the second week in January. Now, admittedly, they hadn't played too many games. I think they'd only played a couple of league games, but they'd lost in the Scottish Cup, I think, to Airdrie. They'd lost in the Challenge Cup to Airdrie. They'd lost to Queen's Park in the league, which is maybe a wee bit surprising, and then drawn with Morton. So as much as I didn't necessarily think beforehand that Arbroath were in danger of dropping out the playoff places, if they had lost this one to Dunfermline, then maybe at that point maybe start to reassess about how Arbroath's season was going. So no, it was a really good win and gives them a really big cushion. I really don't see them kind of giving up now in terms of the maybe potentially dropping out the playoffs. I would imagine them now finish top 4 at worst.
Oh, absolutely. Oh, sorry, I was going to say just that. Said they're a wee bit of an island unto themselves at the moment. As of recording, it's 7 points from Partick Thistle in second place and 7 points above Ayr United. So I agree with you. I think it's very, very difficult to envisage anything other than Arbroath. I was doing the BBC Sports Scotland podcast this morning with Ryan Flynn was on it, the Arbroath midfielder, and he was just talking about that. Just that they began the season, it was get to 40 points. And basically just do everything you can to survive. But as the season's gone on, the objectives have completely changed now. It's not about survival, and it's just about trying to finish up as high in the league table as they can. I think this might be as good as it can get for them in third place, and that's not me being critical at all. I think this season has completely surpassed expectations, and it's testament to the work that Colin Hamilton, David Gold, the players have all done there, because it's been a really, really smashing campaign for them all, and so fair play to them. Not so good for Dunfermline though.
No, I mean, in terms of Dunfermline, it constantly feels like, and I totally caveat this with the fact that they play Partick Thistle after we record this, and we'll see how that goes. But even if they win that, it just constantly feels like there's more questions than answers when it comes to Dunfermline, and it's been like that for a long time now. I think there is questions in terms of Neil Lennon. I thought his post-match rant was interesting. I think there's questions about how he sets them up. I think there's questions about their recruitment policy. But as much as I think Lennon got not a free pass, but I think he certainly got a pass in terms of how things went last season, I think quite rightly there are questions to be asked about how this season has progressed, because ultimately they've spent a fair bit of money, and it doesn't look like they are any closer to the playoff spots than they were last season, and that's a disappointment.
Yeah, can't really disagree with any of that. I think we're all expecting big things from Dunfermline Athletic in the summer. Neil Lennon had been confirmed as a permanent manager. They had made some interesting signings. They were blooding through some interesting youngsters. Guys like Andy Todd who's come to the fore. There was high hopes for like Jeremiah Chillicoe Mullen. Robbie Fraser had signed the club, so there was a lot of decent players in there. But it just hasn't really happened for them. And I can understand why the supporters are perhaps maybe turning against Lennon. And it might be the thought that he is a bit of he needs to be managing a big team with big resources. And that, I think you can, what I'm trying to say is that you can be a manager that can do that. Like, I think that's a skill in itself, managing big clubs who've got big resources when there's a big degree of expectation on you. That's a skill in itself. And not a lot of people can do that. I think that's quite personality driven. But in Dunfermline's instance, when it is like you're bringing through a lot of young players at the same time, I think Dunfermline's recruitment model, if I'm right in saying, is quite analytics based as well. There's some of the players that I'm sure Lennon would like to get, like proven experienced players, and I'm sure they tried to get proven experienced players in, but weren't able to get them for whatever reason. I'm not sure he's the right man to be leading this project at the moment, if you know what I mean. I think Neil Lennon's got many qualities as a manager, but this might be not necessarily within his skill set.
It just feels like the recruitment has been quite patchwork. Like, in terms of, and he was quite vociferous after the game on Saturday, about very critical about both his goalkeepers. So they started with Billy Terrell, then brought in Dennis Mehmet for the second half. Both of them were at fault for at least two, maybe three goals between them. He was hugely critical, and we can maybe get on to that later. But I never think that's a particularly clever thing to do. But maybe some people would disagree. So certainly goalkeeper wise, I don't think they've recruited well in that position whatsoever. I think defensively they've probably done okay. I think the issue is maybe in front of that midfield. Not sure, and certainly in terms of forwards, I don't think they've recruited well at all. And it's just, I think there's a lot to be said for bringing in younger players. players that could potentially maybe get on 2 or 3 year deals that you think could make a huge impact in the Scottish Championship, and then you potentially sell them on for a profit going forward. That's fine. I think maybe their biggest failing is, as Neil Lennon has alluded to in the past, about maybe not having experienced players to maybe lead them or help them on the park, but also maybe in terms of players that were already at the club who they gave like extensions to. Like, I think it's maybe not a great example in terms of the fact that he scored at the weekend. I thought giving Josh Cooper like a 3-year extension at the start of this season based on the fact he had a good League Cup campaign was very, very strange.
Yeah, that's right. Because I was actually thinking I'm not massively been paying attention to Dunfermline results, but when I saw that it was Cooper that scored, and it's a very nice goal as well, it's sort of penny in my head, like it's sort of the penny in my skull sort of dropped, and I was like, he was signing a really big contract. And I thought at that point, I'm not sure what the thinking was behind it. I think that maybe it was to protect the asset just off the back of a couple of
maybe
a real, as you say, a purple patch. He's went through a couple of games scoring, but it wasn't really a big enough body of evidence to justify giving him that length of contract.
I've never been entirely sure about Chris Hamill, for example. I think Oakley Booth maybe given a contract extension this summer, which I thought was very strange. So I think what Dunfermline currently have is an unusually big squad for Championship standards, but not necessarily one. I think when you whittle it down, then it's, do they have the starting 11 or a bench of a team that you would expect to finish in the top 4? Not necessarily. So I'm not saying that this season has been a disaster by any stretch of imagination, and maybe Lennon can still do something going forward in terms of a summer transfer window. But this, I do see some suggestions that say, well, you couldn't solve, like Dunfermline were poor last season, and you couldn't necessarily get to where they wanted to be via 2 transfer windows. I'm not entirely sure I agree with that. Like, I think if you have 1 or 2 really good transfer windows, then you're a far better team. But I'm not necessarily seeing that from Dunfermline at this moment in time. I'm not saying that's Neil Lennon's fault. I don't know how their recruitment process works, but I don't think, as much as there's been some exciting players brought in, I don't think it's worked so far. So I do think there needs to be a rethink come the summer. Not necessarily about Neil Lennon, but I do think he comes into the equation, but in terms of the recruitment in general.
I found Lennon's post-match interview quite interesting. It's interesting for a number of reasons. Perhaps the most headline stuff, the stuff about the goalkeepers. I'll park that for a second, but what I did find interesting was he said that he felt the team actually played quite well in difficult conditions. It's just that they didn't take their chances at one end, and they were badly let down by both goalkeepers in either half for the first and third goals. He maybe questioned the second goal. I don't think so. I think that it's quite badly defended. It's the sort of the ball swung into the box and no one really deals with it, and Aaron Muirhead's allowed to basically react first to divert it into the net. I wouldn't necessarily blame the goalkeepers for that. I'd certainly blame them for the first and third goals anyway. But it was talking about some of the chances they missed, and they did actually have some good chances in the game. And I think Andy Todd, who they got Dunfermline's equaliser in this, he passed up a couple of good chances. There was one in the first half, one in the second half. He got put through, and basically had his touch been a bit more assured, he would have taken that into his stride, and he had a really good shooting chance from about 12, 14 yards or so. He fluffed his chance, and it's gone. He wasn't able to control it properly. The second one was in the second half. The ball sort of breaks him in the box, and I think he's got time to maybe look up and have a think about what he's doing, but he just swings a leg at it. And it's actually, it's a good save from McAdams, but I just feel like Todd might have done a wee bit better in the moment. I don't know. It was quite close to goal, so maybe that's all he could have done. And so again, going back to talking to Ryan Flynn about this match this morning, he thought it was like a kind of match where you've really got to dig deep to get a result. It looked like it was absolutely miserable conditions at Gayfield, as it tends to be. In fact, I think the last time that I was doing a BBC podcast with Ryan Flynn, it was the week after they drew 1-1 with Greenock Morton. If you remember that match, it was on the BBC Scotland channel.
Yes,
and it was
terrible.
Aye, that was not that barely resembled a football game. I think it's the sort of match at the start. Like the two managers said, "Listen, do you want to just call it a draw and we can head down the road?" Sounds fine. Cheers. We'll see you later. But they kind of to dig deep for that again. While Flynn was talking about how Arbroath were able to dig deep for it, that's something that Lennon was quite critical of his players not having. He said that they lacked steel, is what he said. He said something about that. They lacked steel, and that's something they need to get to the bottom of. Something that Arbroath have got in abundance, the calibre players have got, but it's something that Dunfermline need to get as well. And I don't know how you toughen players up. I don't know, is that signing different personalities? Is that just something that comes with playing, like they get another 100, 150 games under their belts? I don't know how you imbibe that into players.
It does also feel like that there is a trend where Neil Lennon will stand after a game and then rattle off a list of reasons why they've lost. And it very rarely comes down to anything he's done.
He said, one of the things, Shaughan, I've got this written down, he said, the buck stops with me, but I can't explain the first goal, maybe the second goal and the third goal. I can't. And it's very much, you see managers like Stuart Kettlewell at times is quite bad for that when he says like this is everyone's responsibility. And then, no, it's not Stuart Kettlewell, it's Stephen Robinson. Stephen Robinson that's quite bad for that. It's listen, I take full responsibility, and then nitpick at the parts that where you were let down. It was the stuff we've touched on it a couple of times. It was the stuff about the goalkeepers. I've never, maybe this season, maybe Michael Mackindo talking about his defenders at Edinburgh City, who ultimately were all emptied. And well, if you watch the highlights from their game against Clyde at the weekend, that has not paid dividends. But this is like Lennon, like absolutely furious with his goalkeepers, singling out, saying like we've been making goalkeeping errors all season. He said that he doesn't know how to change it because he doesn't have the personnel to do so. That's changed since then. They've signed Aston Oxborough on loan from Motherwell until the end of the season. I think that's a really smart piece of business. I think that the general consensus seems to be that he's actually a very good goalkeeper and someone that, if it not been for, is it Elliot Watt, the Motherwell goalkeeper? Let me just check just now. Motherwell aren't a team that I've got to talk much about. So that's it's Elliot Watt. No, he plays in midfield for Motherwell.
I was going to say, I don't think it's Elliot Watt.
It's not Elliot Watt. Let me go on Wikipedia. Current squad. It is Callum Ward. Elliot Watt. What a fucking numpty. There's probably someone shouting at this. Like, who the fuck is this goalkeeper? Elliot Watt. Shaughan Want. Callum Ward. Elliot Watt, right? It's just because the goalkeeper did check it's because Callum Ward has been so good that Oxborough can't get in the team. And I think the general consensus, he was perhaps a bit hard done by. It was not necessarily anything he's done, just the fact this new goalkeeper's been very, very good. So I think if he can catch crosses,
save shots, not come steaming out to the edge of your penalty box 90 seconds into a game and get a dead leg and concede a goal at the same time. If you can, it's like the Rudyard Kipling poem, if you can do all these things, then boy, you'll be a decent championship goalkeeper. I did think the Tyrrell situation was quite interesting because I think there was a suggestion that he fell out with Lennon over Christmas and New Year. And that's why Mehmet came in, maybe against Wraith Rovers. That might have been when he came back into the team and done very little wrong. I don't think Mehmet done done anything wrong over the next maybe 2 or 3 games. Then he very much kind of reverted back to the mean and became the Mehmet that we all know. I thought it was interesting that Tyrrell was given a 2-year deal and Dunfermline fans were broadly very, very positive about that. I've not seen too much from him so far to suggest that he is going to be a good goalkeeper. I think he's been competent so far, albeit he's young. But I think what I disliked about Lennon's comments on Saturday was the fact that Tyrrell has literally just been given a 2-year deal, which presumably means that Lennon and the club are very much behind as a goalkeeper, and then he's maybe his first or second game back in the sticks. Lennon's given him a real hard time. And I must admit, to be fair, I initially thought that he'd went off at half-time for performance-related reasons. He was very much at fault for the first goal. But I think he might have got a dead leg in the process, and that's why Mehmet came on. But regardless, I'm never too keen on managers kind of throwing players under a bus, and that's very much how it felt. What it felt Lennon was doing on Saturday.
Well, that's very interesting to see how he would address that. I mean, they're playing Partick Thistle tonight. I imagine the most nervous person in the entire stadium would have been whoever it is. I imagine it's going to be Dennis Mehmet if Tyrrell's shaking off the effects of a dead leg. Mehmet, every touch of the ball would be scrutinised, and I don't know if it, if you know you're under a greater degree of scrutiny, it might inhibit your performances, especially if you're a goalkeeper where one mistake is very likely to lead directly to an opposition goal. Then I don't think that did them any favours. So I think it's probably, given what he said, it's probably just as well the pair of them won't be playing in this evening's match. I'm likely to be playing at the weekend. And Aston Oxborough can give Neil Lennon the security at the back that he thinks he needs. I've got to say though, I do agree with him. The both goals are really bad. I mean, the first one, I do have a degree of sympathy for Tyrrell. I mean, he makes a terrible decision to come out. He comes steaming out to the edge of his box, and I've got to say, it's really brave from Ryan Dow actually to put your head in like there. Just if you've not seen the goal, it's a free kick. It's a long ball punted towards the box of Tam O'Brien, and Dow just sort of kind of flops onto it but at the same time as Tyrrell comes flying out. Tyrrell takes a sore one, gets a dead leg for it, and the ball just sort of sails over his head and into the net. I think that was bad. I think that's a degree of, there's misfortune. There's bad goalkeeping, obviously. He'll take the blame for a degree of misfortune. The third one, where Mehmet punches the ball into his own net, that's just, I don't know how you can, that is, you're watching that between your fingers. And for Lennon, I think would have been an absolute disbelief at what he'd have seen off the back of that. Because it's one thing having one goalkeeper make one mistake, but to have your other goalkeeper do something as egregious, if not more egregious than that, about an hour later, you'd be like, right, what's the point?
I didn't think Mehmet looked too clever at the second one as well. And I know you've said it wasn't disastrous, and I agree with that. But I think he could have done better. Although I think it might have been to Chillico or Mullen that might have kind of diverted it past. But regardless, it just felt like Mehmet was kind of diving to a different place. It was a weird goal in general. But I mean, regardless, that second half, Mehmet did not cover himself in glory. Regardless.
No, and I suppose the scoreline, as Lennon said in his post-match interview, he wasn't too bothered about the goal from Finlay Marshall that ultimately made the point save. He said he'd rather lose a game 4-2 and go for it than 3-2 and not go for it. So it's just an interesting time at Dunfermline. We talked about it as well. We talked about Aston Oxborough coming into the club. Talk about a player who's left the club over the past week, and that's Jefferson Caceres, the Peruvian winger, who I think it cost quite a wee bit of money when they brought him in from Sheffield United. I think, am I right in saying that he had showed flashes of promise early on in his career, but hadn't featured at all since early December, and as far as best remembered for uppercutting Dan O'Reilly in a defeat at Partick Thistle?
Off the top of my head, he certainly came off the bench at Starts Park in a game that Wraith won. And he showed wee flashes that suggested to me he might have been okay. I think he was quite good. Remember Dunfermline won maybe 5-0 the last time they were at Gayfield? Was it 5-0 maybe?
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I think he was quite good in that game. And then as you say, that kind of Partick Thistle game, I think he's barely been seen since I know homesickness was suggested as to why he's went back. That there was a whole kind of strange situation where the analytics team that's involved at Dunfermline and Sheffield United, they brought him into Sheffield United, I think for a lot of money. There's a $500,000 or $1 million. Didn't make any performance. I don't know if he played at all for Sheffield United, then went on to Dunfermline. So back to Peru, where presumably he might manage to make some appearances. A strange, in terms of Sheffield United to Dunfermline back to Peru, just a strange thing all in.
Was there not someone in Pine Borough that suggested he'd been trafficked? Was there not a big discussion about that at the time?
I mean, I think they were just having a laugh, but that's still a strange thing altogether.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to tell with some of these St Johnstone fans if they are having a laugh or not. I don't think they are, but nevertheless, it's a conversation worth bringing up all the same. What about Arbroath though, Shaughan? This was, as you mentioned there, this is a win that's got them back on track after some sort of effectively get them back on track after not winning and getting dumped out of the cup competitions by, I suppose, a team that they would have fancied themselves to be beaten. I think in the GDM Evolution Trophy and the Scottish Cup, you would have fancied Arbroath to get the better of Airdrieonians. But I think in this match, I think it was a good win. And I like David Gold's post-match comments where he talked about even though David Gold was dressed like a skateboarder in his post-match interview, I need to bin that hat, mate. It's not really working for you. But he talked about how January had been tough, and he talked about there had been the turnover in the playing squad. A couple of players left, some players came in. Training had been changed around, which no one likes their sort of routine. I think quite some of the football players, they don't like the routine being quite out of whack. They're creatures of habit. They played a lot of games and the team were looking tired, but they looked a lot more effervescent here, and they were able to dig in, deal with the difficult conditions, react to the change that Dunfermline made. They normally play with 3 at the back, here they went with the back 4. Terrible weather, but got dug in. Players seemed to be enjoy fighting with each other. That's the wrong word. Fighting for each other. The players seemed to enjoy fighting for each other and working together, and that was born out of, I think, the celebrations, particularly in the second half when they all went over to celebrate in that corner of the ground near the Dunfermline fans. I think it was most of the outfield players were out to join them, so there does seem a real good team spirit there, and a really big win for them.
Yeah, I thought a lot of what he said was really interesting in terms of, I think when he'd sent them out, he expected them to start with a back 3, and that wasn't the case. I think it started with they went with a back 4. He said the players had to essentially kind of figure that out. So I thought that was quite interesting. The fact he touched on, so they haven't played for a while, but he thought they were looking quite lethargic, as you've kind of alluded to. The cup games went to penalties, so they had played a lot of extra minutes. The fact that training had been disrupted, again, as you mentioned. I do think somebody that they've brought in, I think Aidan Nesbitt that they've brought in,
could be, yeah.
I think that's a really good signing. Okay, in terms of scoring goals, he doesn't have a great goal scoring record, but in terms of maybe creating chances, in terms of causing defences trouble, I think it's a really good signing. They seem to take great delight actually in terms of scoring one of the goals against Dunfermline, kind of given that they kind of get it right up you to the Dunfermline fans. Don't know if you noticed, I'm sure it was a 4th goal. Now, as you said, the Arbroath players kind of run to the corner, the terracing, where the Dunfermline fans are, but they weren't necessarily congregated at that point. And as soon as the goal goes in, the Dunfermline fans start to kind of drift away. And no wonder, I mean, it was like it was the last minute, so that's absolutely fair enough. There was the Dunfermline fan in a big orange jacket. I don't know if you've seen him, but he kind of comes round from behind the goals and then comes right round to where the Arbroath players have congregated. And he's very much kind of slagging them off and giving it I'd imagine he has a potty mouth, but very, very funny. But no, like David Gold said, like loads of good stuff. As it has been this season, just loads of and really encouraging stuff when it comes to Arbroath.
Yeah, and again, I think that on the transfers, I think that's something the Arbroath board deserve credit for. They did it last year when they were able to bring in the guys like Andy Winter and Sam Stanton and Aaron Muirhead. I think the board really pushed the boat out there when they were in League One. That League One title was there for the taking, and they were able to strengthen their players. Strengthen the team with players that I don't think any other side in the division could. And ultimately, those players played a really big part in getting them over the line. I think the business that they've done in terms of getting Tom Beadling in, getting, as you mentioned, Aidan Nisbet in. Tom Lang wasn't playing in this match, but Tom Lang is a very solid championship defender that can add depth at centre-back if O'Brien and Muirhead are unavailable. And it feels like they've got a wealth of options to play with as well. It's all there's if things aren't going well, they have players on the bench that can change things around. So it feels like when you look at that Arbroath squad, maybe compared to some other teams around them, maybe like Ayr United, for instance, maybe even Partick Thistle, there's more depth within the Arbroath squad.
Yeah, it's funny, like, because you started the podcast and saying this might be like third in the championship, might be as good as it gets, and I agree with that in terms of league position, but in terms of the playoffs, if we're now agreed that Arbroath are going to finish, say third, or even if they finish fourth, they'll be in the quarterfinals of the playoffs. I would start them as the favourites to defeat Ayr United or Dunfermline or whoever might finish fourth. Now, I wouldn't start them as favourites to defeat whoever finishes second, but let's say it is Partick Thistle. I wouldn't put it past them. Like, I think Arbroath have a genuinely good squad. Where it becomes much more difficult is defeating the team that finishes 11th, because I think Kilmarnock have got better. Dundee don't seem that bad. So that's where it becomes very, very difficult. But I would fancy Arbroath in the playoffs in terms of getting past quarterfinals and semi-finals, for example.
Yes, but I only think there's only one team getting promoted from the Championship this season.
Aye, I wouldn't disagree. That's St Johnstone, very much so. Unless you mean Partick Thistle. But no, I think it's St Johnstone.
Whoever wins the league's going to get promoted, obviously. But I can't say. I think that whoever finishes in 11th, it depends. Maybe St Mirren have got a bit of a stink about them at the moment. Kilmarnock seem to have got better. I think Livingston will finish bottom. I still think only one team is going to get promoted out of the division.
Yeah, I think so.
But just obviously, there's Dunfermline Thistle this evening, but at the weekend, Shaughan, we've got Dunfermline Athletic versus Queen's Park. Queen's Park in really, really good form at the moment. Yeah. We talked about them on last week's show after beating Ross County 1-0 in Dingwall. They followed that up by beating Greenock Morton 3-2 at Lesser Hampden. And this was a really good win for Queen's Park. I'm really chuffed to see Queen's Park begin to get their act together. Josh Fowler moved on. We've acknowledged how big an impact he had to the club. He has left, but they've not really missed a beat. That's 3 wins out of 4 matches, and they, believe it or not, they're in touching distance with that final playoff spot if they can win their games in hand. It's a big if, but just incredible just how a couple of wins has completely turned the season around, and there is now a small gap between themselves and Airdrie and Ross County at the bottom of the table.
Yeah, it's interesting that Queen's Park seem to have got better since Josh Fowler's left to join St Johnstone. Meanwhile, as soon as he joined St Johnstone, he is clearing balls off the Wraith Rovers goal line that's been clattered in by Sam Stanton. Extraordinary. In terms of how I think the game will go, Dunfermline's home form is, and I again appreciate that I don't know how they get on against Partick Thistle on Tuesday evening, that their home form in general this season has been really poor. So I do fancy Queen's Park to take something from this one, but maybe a draw.
Great getting Scott Martin in as well. I know that he's not fully fit at the moment. I know his time at Partick Thistle was probably really disappointing, but he had a serious injury. I think he was going to retire at one point. That was in the books. But, and that's a big but, if he can replicate the same kind of form that he showed when he was a Hamilton Academical player, I think there was a lot of time when you and I would talk about Aki's, unanimous in our praise for Scott Martin, and just said that every time Aki's did something good, he seemed to be at the heart of it. If he can get up to speed and he can reprise that level of form that he showed, I think he'll be a huge signing for Queen's Park. I think that it's an area of the pitch they've needed reinforcements in. I don't think that Louis Longridge and Roddy McGregor can really cut it at championship level. They need something else to be in there. And I think Martin could be that kind of player. So it's great. It's great to see as well that they've been able to sign like proven championship experience in this window. You know, there's Martin, there is Callum Smith, Ricky Lamy has come in. They're not world beaters by any means, but they're certainly better than the options that they might have had off the bench. So that's good that Crichton has got. And Todorov as well.
Todorov, yeah.
I made this point, and to repeat myself, if anyone had listened to the BBC Sport podcast on Tuesday, Scotland podcast on Tuesday morning, but you know, when you hear a striker that just said, one needs to go in off his arse and that'll be him flying. That literally happened to Nikolai Todorov. That shot did it cannoned off him, run away celebrating like Fabio Grosso in the semi-finals of the 2006 World Cup against Germany. And then minutes later in highlights, he's trying like a bicycle kick inside the penalty box.
It was the worst bicycle kick. Absolutely terrible.
The fact that he attempted it in the first place, though, that shows his confidence.
Confidence is high.
Exactly. So I'll be interested to see what Queen's Park can do. That battle at the bottom still very, very interesting. The other game, Shaughan, Arbroath will travel to Firhill, take on Partick Thistle.
Thistle's home form is very good, and they generally win games by a single goal. So I'll go exactly for that at the weekend. I'll say maybe 2-1 to Partick Thistle.
Yeah, I think that's a good opportunity. This week is a very good opportunity for Partick Thistle to, well, basically knock Arbroath out of the title race if they were even in it, and to begin with. But it's a good opportunity for Thistle to really close in on St Johnstone. St Johnstone themselves playing Tuesday night against Queen's Park. So we will see how they get on this evening. Before we move on, Shaughan, I don't know if you saw this on Dunfermline Athletic's YouTube channel. The team from 1984-1985, who I think, if I'm right in saying they won promotion to the First Division that season, they had recorded a song to the tune of EastEnders.
Yes.
The players reunited at Carnegie College to celebrate the anniversary, and there's a great video of like Ian Westwater talking about the song, and they all got back together to sing it. It's really nice.
I've seen the original a lot, but I've not seen them kind of reuniting, so I've not watched that yet.
It's been. I'll be honest and say that they were far more enthusiastic 40 years ago about singing this song than they were now. Have you ever seen the clip of Bob Dylan singing "We Are the World"? And he's all sort of confused as to what he's actually in there. Imagine that, but loads of bald guys in Carnegie College, and you're on the right lines.
I just think it's very funny. There was you had Paul Coya and an old woman from EastEnders just looking very, very confused. I'm sure they had their film scarves at one point. Just a wonderful daytime TV moment.
Yeah, when I was the stadium announcer at Stenhousemuir one time, I played Anyone Can Fall in Love by Anita Dobson. And for those that don't know, that's a pop song sung by Anita Dobson, who played Angie Watts, the wife of Dirty Den. And basically it's anyone can fall in love. That's quite nice. But basically, people were asking, are you playing the theme tune for EastEnders? I was like, no. I'm playing Anyone Can Fall in Love by Anita Dobson. There's a big difference between the two. It's just the same tune, really. It's like, are you
not a huge difference.
No. Are you playing Axel F there? I says, no, I'm playing Crazy Frog instead to Axel F. That's probably actually, now I think of it, that's my one big regret, has been the stadium announcer at Stenhousemuir. I didn't play any Crazy Frog. Maybe if I ever get asked back, that's what I do. Crazy Frog and Indulci Jubilo back to back. I'll really put everyone in the mood for it. Now, Shaughan, we will head into League One and we'll examine the top of the table clash between Inverness, Caledonian Thistle and Stenhousemuir. Ollie White gave the Warriors an early lead with a well-taken goal after 6 minutes, but Alfie Babbage's close-range finish in the 19th minute tied the contest. Ben Brannan was sent off midway through the second half, but it had no material impact on the game, and it ended as a stalemate. This result made no change to the summit of League One. Inverness, Caledonian Thistle are still top with 48 points. Stenhousemuir are in second, 5 points behind them. Shaughan, I was at the Caledonian Stadium on Saturday. I saw everything from behind the goals. So please ask me anything you want about Cali Thistle 1, Stenhousemuir 2. Beg your pardon. Stenhousemuir 1. Sorry, get carried away there. Wishful thinking.
1-1.
Yes, 1-1.
This feels like a much better point for Inverness than it does Stenhousemuir. But how did actually before the game, how confident were you going into it?
I'm always confident with the Stenhousemuir team. Genuinely, a lot of people on the bus up were quite worried. Matty Aitken was unavailable, Dale Carrick was unavailable, Mikey Anderson was unavailable, Kelsey Ewan wasn't available as well. But you're effectively going into the match with no strikers. So Zeke Cameron, a winger who's on loan from Dunfermline, and Ewan O'Reilly had to play up front. And their game, and they'll put themselves about, but very different positions, asking somebody to play out wide than somebody to come up against like Danny Devine and Remy Savage and try and hold the ball up and bring the rest of the team into play. But I think that Gary Naismith really seems to thrive. The less he has to work with, the better he seems to do, if you know what I mean. So coming up for this one, I thought, well, the team really have got nothing to lose here. Let's give it a good go. So I felt quite sanguine about the Warriors' chances coming into it. And I think I got that right. You're right in saying that the draw's better for for Inverness Caledonian Thistle, because we've got 11 games of the season left to go. There's a 5-point gap. Effectively, Cali Thistle just need to keep on winning all their games and they win the league. But teams have got to play each other again at some point at Oakview, and fancy Stenhousemuir to win that. But I thought it was a good game of football. We can break down the constituent parts. But going into it, I thought, yeah, Cali Thistle will be the favourites for it, but there's no reason why Stenny couldn't take something from the match.
And in terms of the kind of start to the game, the game could barely have started any better from a kind of Warriors perspective. 5 minutes gone, 6 minutes gone.
Yeah.
All the Whites go. Defensively, dreadful, but a perfect start.
Yeah, it was. I thought Ollie White's goal was really, really well taken. Basically, if you've not seen the goal, Ben Brannan tries a crossfield pass. It hits White on the head and sort of goes towards Remy Savage, but Zeke Cameron, and this is what I was so quite impressed with Cameron and O'Reilly, because not centre forwards. I think there's a good 5 or 6 inches that Savage has got on Cameron. Cameron's actually quite a wee toty boy. But the fact that he was just able to like sort of bang into him and noise him up a wee bit, allowed the header to rebound into the path of Ollie White. And his touch is brilliant. The way he's basically running at Define, and he just like slaloms past him and takes the ball into his left foot and finishes. It's a really, really nice goal. And it's just another example of how Ollie White has improved over the course of the season, how better a player he's becoming, and how I have no doubt he will become a part of the Motherwell team. Maybe if it's not next season, it'll definitely season after. I think he might benefit from another loan spell, maybe at championship level. He's been Lowland League, League One, maybe in the championship, who knows. But he's definitely got a future as a Motherwell player. I really what I've seen from him. But I think defensively, very good from Stenhousemuir, from White and from Cameron, both just in terms of like endeavour, getting in the right place at the right time, just hard work, what that can reap. But from Inverness Caledonian Thistle, like Brannan going back to the club, I remember seeing that announced and thinking, that's a really good piece of business. I was surprised that Kilmarnock didn't have much use for him, given how well I think he'd started under Kettlewell. I think there was really high hopes for him. Talk maybe of an outside shout for a Scotland cap, maybe at one point, or certainly in a Scotland cap in the future. Not much use for him. Goes back to Cali Thistle, where play every week. But he had a mixed game. He set up Stenhousemuir's goal, set up Inverness Caledonian Thistle's goal, and then got sent off for throwing the ball away. So, bit of a mixed afternoon for him.
I mean, you're right. Mixed is correct. I also think you're being quite positive about him in terms of the fact he gave away the goal and then left them in the lurch. But I suppose in between time, you're right. He did have a positive impact in the kind of 19th, 20th minute where Inverness equalised. I suppose if there's one kind of negative, it was the fact that Stenny couldn't keep that lead for longer. But no, it was a decent goal from an Inverness perspective.
I think the two things can be right at the same time. I thought it was a brilliant ball in from Brannan and a really good finish from Alfie Bavidge. But at the same time, that's the way that Stenhousemuir tend to play against the bigger teams. You've got really good penalty box defenders, and Nicky Jamieson was excellent in this game as well. Like really, really good performance. Arguably Stenhousemuir's best player on the day. Jamieson, Buchanan and Archie Graham in that back five. And then you got like Ross Meakin and Kinley Billings. You're all guys that are quite comfortable at heading the ball. And I think that you've got to, you're not likely to play through them, so you've got to get the ball out wide. And I say, Stenhousemuir are quite good at repelling things that come into the box. But Graham just loses him. And it's just like, he runs across him and he gets the toe and puts it through Darren Jamieson's legs. So that was the only disappointment from that match. There was boys in the crowd. The Surrey boys had been shouting like Aberdeen reject at Bavidge. I remember thinking, Christ, that is going to come back to haunt you. And
is that why? Because he does kind of bam it up a bit. I was wondering if something had been said.
That's exactly why. That's exactly why he was doing the cup behind the ears. And I just remember saying, guys, I wouldn't be shouting that. And then sure enough, that's what happens. And for the rest of the half, Cali Thistle, Bavidge had another really good attempt. He should have scored. The ball comes into the box. I think Zimba goes in for a diving header, misses it, and Bavidge just steals across the back post, but he headers the ball across the face of goal and just narrowly past the post. He really should have scored that. the first half felt like it was taking ages from a Stenhousemuir perspective. The first half felt like it was taking ages. Cally Thistle, I'm sure they must have had like 3/4 of the possession. They were moving it from side to side, but without really testing Darren Jameson. Darren Jameson really didn't have much to do in this game. Not much to do at all. The ball was being moved from side to side, but there was never any point where Stenhousemuir really prized apart. It was you were nervous because the other team were having loads of the ball. But then if you can sort of look at it at a macro level, what are they actually doing with it? Not very much. And this is what Scott Kelleher said in his post-match interview. That was the frustrating thing, was they saw plenty of the ball, but just not quick enough in terms of moving it around and trying to prize Stenhousemuir apart. And they've got players that can do that. Paul Allen can do that. Alfie Stewart can do it. Alfie Stewart's having a terrific season. He had a really good effort. He almost scored with a shot from about 25 yards that just sort of swerved past the post. But then in the second half, again, they didn't really do much to threaten. And when I thought Stenhousemuir might have looked like the better scorer, and there was a chance, didn't make it into the highlights. The ball dropped at the feet of Ollie White inside the box, and I think he put everything behind it and ended up like basically kicking it vertically rather than straight away and over the bar. And that effort was made much more difficult because when Brannan went off, then that made it was almost like the roles were reversing. I know Cally Thistle fans don't particularly like Darren Jameson and think he's a time waster. Well, you've seen Ross Monroe in those final 15 minutes. Anytime he got the ball, just grabbing it, falling to his knees, falling on his chest, and then just do that thing where you just look around and wait for everyone to get up the park. Which is fair enough. That's exactly the appropriate way to behave in the circumstances. But in the final game, where Stenhousemuir win a lot of free kicks and corners, they've got, as we mentioned, they're big boys that can attack the ball inside the box. They just weren't the balls. They would maybe get a touch on it, and the ball would land, and it just wouldn't land at anyone's feet to stick it away. And I think that Kelleher's right in what he says. Like, a draw is the correct result. I can understand the frustration in that match. It said that Cally Thistle went at their best, and they weren't moving the ball around speedily enough to prize apart Stenhousemuir. But it's ultimately they're still got that 5-point advantage. The other thing to say as well is that it's something that Cally Thistle maybe struggle with is breaking teams down. And I don't know. I've seen people say this is something they might struggle with in the Championship. I don't think that teams in the Championship will treat Cally Thistle the same degree of reverence, fear than they would at this. And
they'll also have, they might have another 5 or 6 different first teamers.
Exactly. So I've seen people say, that's something that Scott Kelleher will need to get better at, coaching his players to break down low blocks. I mean, when they get promoted, I think as much as I want Saint to push them as far as they can, I do still think they'll win the division and go up. But teams will just look at them as another side to face, rather than it's like not like you're playing Arsenal, anyone like that, or Manchester City. You're playing like there'll be a decent Championship team next season. So I think, but that's something they've struggled a wee bit with this season, and that's maybe why they haven't pulled away at the top of the table. And I think there's something that they found difficult. Gary Naismith is just a really good tactician, and it's not just like being good at tactics and knowing how to beat other teams or to frustrate other teams, but it's getting the players to buy into it. And certainly, again, you just can't fault Stenhousemuir's effort and work rate in this, because they really put a lot into it.
I know they've obviously drawn a few games recently. The way you've kind of mentioned it, I take it you don't expect Stenny to win the league, but do you still expect them to run them close?
I think so. I think if you look at that top 4 at the moment, I think the top 4 is going to stay the way it is. I think from Queen of the South, and without checking, I think there's about a 7-point gap between Queen of the South and Peterhead from 4th to 5th place. So, and I think Stenhousemuir, what's that? That's that 7 points, about 10 points. I can't see Stenhousemuir dropping enough points for that to happen. The only thing that perhaps worries me is that you've got the end of season drop off that's happened in the last 2 years for Stenny. If you remember the season they won the league, 8 consecutive draws and a defeat. And then the end of last season, I think it was like 1, maybe 2 wins in 9 matches, and they were very fortunate on the final day of the season to finish in the top 4, with Arbroath Athletic being beaten by Kelty Hearts. So that's the only thing that troubles me. However, I think I've said it before, this squad is this season's team is better than last season's team. I think that last season's team, you had guys who were like good football players in like Nat Wedderburn and Blair Alston and Kai Jacobs. But this season's team are just a lot fitter than them, able to get in the park. If you think about, you don't have Nat Wedderburn, and Nat Wedderburn, perhaps one of the most unique players to have featured in lower league Scottish football in recent years, but he just couldn't really get around the pitch. You take him out of the equation, you've got someone like Finlay Gray in there who is a wee buzz bomb in the middle of the park. Leighton Grant can get around the pitch. Scott McGill is a bit more mobile. So they do have players that are still quality in the ball and just a bit more mobile, a bit quicker off the mark, a bit fitter. So I think that is something they do have in their favour. And on top of that as well, as players, there's a team are just, I think, more cohesive now than they were last year. Matt Aitken's playing to a higher level than he was last season. Like Ross Meekin's arguably in Stenhousemuir's Player of the Year this season. We went all of last year without Nicky Jameson. He's back in. So I do think Stenny are in a better position this season than they were last. And I do think they can, they'll last the pace. I've said it certainly to my friends, I do think Stenhousemuir can get promoted this season. I actually think Stenhousemuir will get promoted this season.
So that was going to be my next question, on the last question on this game. I take it you think they have more chance of getting promoted than Arbroath. You think they can win the playoffs?
Yeah, because the gap between the bottom end of the Championship and the top end of League One is a lot less pronounced than the top of the Championship and the bottom of the Premiership. I think that if it was Queen's Park, I would maybe prior to the past couple of weeks, I think Queen's Park were in the team that I wanted to face the most because I think we could have beaten them. But like you tell me, you look at Ross County, have we seen anything from Ross County at all to suggest that they're anything to be scared of? I don't think so. Airdrieonians, they can play good football, but they don't win games, and they can't
win any games.
They don't win games, and they're going through a real scoring drought at the moment. I think that Airdrie have really been competitive, and they've given teams a good go. But there's the last 3 weeks, they gave St Mirren a good go, still lost it. Yeah. Should have drawn with St Johnstone at the very least, still lost it. Gave Partick Thistle some nervous moments at the weekend, still lost. So and you absolutely scudded Morton in the Scottish Cup. So no, I totally understand where you're coming from. Yeah, so I'm confident about Stenhousemuir's chance, and I think as well with Matt Aitken, Dale Carrick coming back to the fitness, Michael Anderson once he's fit, I think he's got a calf problem or something that he's got. Once he's fit, I think Michael Anderson's a brilliant player. I think Stenhousemuir will be in a good place going into that final third. Just for Caley Thistle though, so if we can finish up by talking about them, just there's a lot of good players in that team. I think I mentioned Alfie Stewart. I think Alfie Stewart's a great player, and I really hope he gets a chance at Aberdeen at some point soon. I was looking at Big Chanka Zimba, and it was there are times when you see Zimba and you think this guy's he's a big fella. He can hold the ball, he can pop off, he can score goals. He did absolutely nothing in this game. Really, really well marshalled by Jameson, Buchanan and Graham, and barely got a kick. A lot of the time when he's playing, one of those games where, do you know when you give it to your centre forward, you basically just don't want to get it straight back off. You want to hold it up and be able to pop it off sideways to guys. A lot of the time when it went to Zimba, it was just going straight back to the person who passed him the ball. So it was quite easy for Stenhousemuir to defend against in that regard. And even when Big Jordan Alonga came on, it didn't really do much. Billy Mackay came on. I think we all know that Mackay's had a great career and he's been a fantastic player for Caley Thistle, but he's probably past his best. But even so, it sounds like I'm being really down on Caley Thistle. I don't mean to be. We all acknowledge that they're the best side in the division. If it wasn't for the punishment for being in administration, it'd be 10 points clear at the top of the table. So, there's a lot to be happy about. And as Kelker says, he knows his team can be better. It's just that Stenny seem to have their number this season for whatever reason. Just that they just can't get around that low block.
He said something that was not similar to what grinning Pete Murphy said about Stenny, but he talked about the fact that just Stenny make things very, very difficult, and they're very, very good at it. So it was a compliment, and not necessarily a backhanded compliment, but it was interesting that kind of follows up with what Peter Murphy said, but it was maybe a wee bit nicer about it.
I suppose that if a team make things difficult for you and you say, we know how Stenhousemuir play, well, then it's your job to find a solution to play around it and get the better of them. You know, it's like, not to beat the point again, but you're a full-time team. You've got the resources and the time to come up with a plan. If the other team play the low blocks and for instance, go back to the Queen of South game, if they want to double up on Liam Smith and Kai Kennedy and stop them from getting in the game, then find a way to where you're not necessarily relying on those players. Get the ball, play it through the middle, play it through Luison and play it through Reece Lyon. They're good players. Get the ball to them. But he couldn't do that. And then because he wasn't able to do that, Stenhousemuir make things really difficult for you. Well, you know that. To find a way to beat them then. This is on you. This is on you, Peter. This is on you, Scott Kelleher. I suppose that I agree with what Kelleher says. He was far more nicer about it than Peter Murphy. That's why when I quite like Kelleher. I quite like him when he's interviewed. I like Peter Murphy as well when he's been interviewed. It's just, you know something, see if we all saw football the same way, where would be the fun in that? We need our dreamers, we need our bullshitters, we need our egotists, we need our one eyes. We need all these guys. That's all part of football's rich tapestry. But Shaughan, coming up next, Kelty Hearts versus Inverness Caledonian Thistle. Shout out to Jamie who reached out to me via Instagram with a stat that this is quite an obvious one, but Jamie pointed out all the same. Kelty Hearts have yet to win a home game all season. I think that might be the worst record in the SPFL. They won a league game, a league game at home. Beg your pardon, a league game at home.
Well, then I would imagine that trend would continue, and Inverness will get an away win.
Yes, and Stenhousemuir, they're at home to Cove Rangers.
Stenny's drawn a lot of games recently. I know there's a theory that Cove Rangers are getting better. I'm going to go for another draw for Stenny and Cove.
No, I think that Stenny are going to win this one. I think it's going to be a pretty crap game of football. Stenny have won the previous two meetings between the sides this season, but albeit by one goal. Both games finished 1-0. Carrick in the first game, Aitken with a penalty in the second. And Cove have had their chances in both games. I can't tell what the story is with Cove. It just feels like it's like managed decline. There's still a couple of good players in there, but as we touched on when we talked about Fraser Fivey's retirement on last week's podcast, is when you see the team that won the league in 2022, where they are now from then, there's been a big drop-off for it. And I think that it's a couple of guys who are good players, maybe slightly past their best, and a lot of young guys who we don't know if they're good enough. And I think for Stenhousemuir, if you want to...
Doyle's left, Glass is injured. So even like it feels like they have like a very, very, I think they have a talented starting 11, but not much out with that. And the fact that, a player left, one of the better players is injured, and one of the better players has now retired. I suppose you can see how maybe that burst of better form but before those things happened has now regressed.
Yeah, I mean, a good goal was at Cooper Masson that got the equaliser against Kelty Hearts. And I just wonder, I saw the reaction when I was watching the highlights of that game back. I think it was the 82nd minute, I think, that he scored in that game to tie it. A lot of the Kelty players sort of fell to their knees and put their head in their hands and just saying, that's a team that are sort of mentally not up to it. So yeah, of course you would fancy the league leaders to go to take on the team bottom of the table and beat them. And likewise, you'd fancy the team who are in second place at home against the second worst team in the division to beat them. But before we move on, Shaughan, a couple of world-class goals from the division to discuss. Another superb goal for Luke Donnelly and Alloa Athletics' 3-0 win over Hamilton Academical. Shuffled the ball between his feet to take Lee Kildare out of the match before, simply passing it, offering it into the net.
It was brilliant. It was like he's finished. So you're right, his jink was tremendous. But then the fact that he essentially knew that as long as he got his essentially pass just inside the post, there was no way the goalkeeper could get to it. And even though his finish was so slow, it was excellent. And another brilliant goal from him.
Yeah, and it looked like the 3-0 going on about 6 or 7 in this game. It looked like Allo were very fearsome. Darry McKinnon not happy with how his side reacted after the interval. But Donnelly's goal, again, not the kind of goal you see very often, but then you don't really see goals like Craig Brown's winner in Montrose's 3-2 win over Queen of the South. Hit from about 30 yards into the top corner, and now the Montrose's highlights, they don't pick it up too well. The camera was quite wonky, for want of a better expression, but there's a couple of Montrose players I follow on Instagram, and they were posting highlights of the goal. I've got like Blair Lyons and Kerr Waddle on Instagram, and they've basically put the video that is somebody's filming from behind the goals. I think it might be somebody who works in the media Montrose, and oh my goodness, the way that ball, it sails so true through the air, and it's one of those ones, you know what it is, it's in the back of the net as soon as it leaves his foot. Just a fantastic goal, great way to win the game.
I've only seen the goal for the highlights, but as you say, like, okay, it's not the kind of best angle, but the fact that it kind of leaves his foot from whatever it is, 25, 30 yards, almost rips the net out, and then, like, okay, to be fair, it's like a kind of last minute goal when they've been 2-0 up, been brought back to 2-2. You're starting to wonder if Queen of South are now going to win the game rather than and Montrose are going to let it slip. But the reaction from everybody, the reaction for the fans, the reaction for the players, like, there's a massive, I don't know, like, he's engulfed by the entire squad. It's class.
You know what I really liked as well? It's one of those ones where he goes and he slides, and all the players behind him all slide in as well. It was brilliant. Now, that's one game that had a last minute goal with everyone celebrating with one another. Let's talk about another game that had a last minute goal where everyone celebrated with one another. We will drop into League Two, and the third and final game took place at Stair Park, where Stranraer defeated the Spartans 2-1. Dean Cleland opened the scoring with a header at the back post, and after much huffing and puffing, the Spartans drew level courtesy of Joe McGrath's very unfortunate own goal. But late on in the game, Aaron Quigg took advantage of some maybe uncertainty from the goalkeeper Paddy Martin to win the game with a wonderful lob. And Stranraer remain in fourth place. They have 33 points. I think they're unbeaten in the league over the past 3 months, which is an incredible achievement for Chris Aitken and his players. Spartans, meanwhile, are in a bit of a slump at the moment. They've taken just 2 points from the last 3 matches. They're in second place, 5 points behind East Kilbride. They do have 2 games in hand, but now there is absolutely no margin for error. Shaughan, what do you make of Stranraer 2, the Spartans 1?
Yeah, I mean, Stranraer just continue to be the kind of pleasant surprise of the season. I don't think anybody saw this coming in terms of challenging for promotion from League Two. I think in terms of the first half, they probably deserve to be a goal up. Chris Aitken touched on that as well. I think in terms of the second half, they were, I don't know if riding the luck is necessarily the right term, because I don't think Max Curry had too many saves to make. I think Spartans deserved to get the equaliser, and based on the highlights, it felt like they were the team that was going to, if anybody was going to win it, they were the one that was going to kind of push on and maybe get a late winner. But actually, I suppose the second half was turned on its head. But I mean, as much as I felt disappointed for Spartans because of, I didn't think it necessarily deserved to lose, but based on the celebrations, based on the fact I've got a soft spot for Stranraer, based on the finish from Aaron Quigg, it was an absolutely brilliant goal. I mean, it was hard to. I must admit, I did enjoy that last minute winner.
Yeah, I mean, probably my favourite thing about it, I think it's not even my favourite moment from the entire weekend, and there was a lot of good moments on the weekend, there's a lot of good football this weekend. When Aaron Quigg hits that shot, James Dolan is sort of standing, just watching. He's got his hands on his head, and just when it kisses the post and goes over the net, and he runs over, and all of a sudden, it's just brilliant. Just watching that, just seeing it going in, that was absolutely fantastic. I reckon everyone in the ground was all doing the same thing. There's something great, you know, about like long range shots or something, or shots where the goalkeeper's caught out and it's just a sort of deft lob, and you just, is that going to drop? Is it going to drop? And then just all of a sudden inside the post, there he's there, piling into Quigg with all the rest of his mates.
It almost felt like that when it left Quigg's foot, James Dolan thought, right, I'll put my hands on my head, because whatever happens here, that's the right place for them to be. So if this doesn't go in, I can go, that was close. But if it does go in, I could just like lift off and celebrate.
Or you could anticipate that the shot might rebound to you and you can get in there and pop it home.
Or you can not stop, I suppose. Yes,
keep going.
That's why he's in League Two.
Exactly, aye. But it's a great finish. And yeah, I think that I think a draw might have been the fairer of the results. Yeah. I think this is something that Chris Aitken might have intimated in his post-match interview where, he talks about that the Spartans would come good in the second half and they were riding the luck a wee bit. But at the same time, for all the pressure that they had, and maybe a draw, maybe, I don't know if they didn't, if Max Curry didn't have any saves to make, does it really count as a draw? If a tree falls in the wood and no one's there to hear it, does it make a sound? I think it's because of the Spartans had so much pressure in the second half, and I think there's quite late on, Martin McNulty picks up the ball from the edge of the area, shoots it just past the post, which could have won the game for it. But on top of that as well, Stranraer's defending was excellent. This is something that Chris Aitken pointed out. There's a bit in the second half. The ball seems to fall. I think it falls to Mark Stowe. He might be at the edge of the 6-yard box, so he's quite deep in his half. But straight away, there are 3 Stranraer players on him. It is very much like, you are not scoring here. We are going to prevent you from scoring. And they're right on top of him to hack the ball away. So suppose that he's got to be delighted with that. And it's, I think for him as well, and just the substitutes that he made ended up winning the game. He mentioned there that Aaron Quink's one of the subs. James Dolan was one of the other subs. So if Quink didn't get onto that ball, Dolan would have got onto it and something would have happened. And the fact as well, it's like the pitch looked really, really heavy. It looked like really, really heavy and a lot of running. That's going to take a lot out of you. And this is something that Kevin Waugh mentioned. Kevin Waugh actually had quite a good post-match interview for the Spartans. But I think that there's a real togetherness at Stranraer, and Aitken said he's got a very difficult job in his hands where he's got players coming back from injury. So for their upcoming match against Elgin City, 2 players are going to have to be left on can't be in the squad. They'll travel down, but he's going to have to leave 2 players out of the team. But he talked about players who have perhaps had to wait. He talked about Kirk Knight. He talked about him and said that he hasn't really had much of a look in, but he's been playing the last couple of matches and he's been thriving. BJ Call, another player who had pretty much just looked like a reserve player while Finn Ekrapont was playing at left back. He's now come in and made the position his own, and he's captain in the side as well. And they're on this unbeaten run. So it's a good place to be, and I think they're in that position where everyone is driving one another on, which is great. No one's upset that they might not necessarily be involved, because if you're not involved at the moment, probably a good chance you'll get a shot a couple of weeks down the line. And Stranraer, there's a lot to play for here. There's a good shout they could get promoted this year. Certainly not outside the realms of possibility. And I think they are both, both physically and mentally in I don't know how physically, I've not seen their GPS monitors, but certainly it's a really good time to be following Stranraer.
No, but you're right, mate. Like Chris Aitken talks about the fact that they have strength and depth, which you've already touched on. But that's really interesting when you think back to how we talked about them in the summer, and the fact that they brought in so many players from the West of Scotland League. And we're like, right, well, okay, that might work, and there might be talent there that we're not aware of, because we're certainly not experts when it comes to the West of Scotland League. Even if I thought best case scenario, some of these signings are going to work out, but certainly not all of them, and certainly maybe even not the majority of them. But actually, it feels like the majority of those signings have kind of worked out, and he's right. He can now turn to the bench and bring on 3 players, 4 players, 5 players that you're not necessarily weakening that starting 11 by bringing these guys on. And yes, I think that there's clearly better teams in the league. I do think that Clyde and Spartans and East Kilbride are better teams in general. But I don't know if they necessarily have that luxury of being able to turn to the bench and make 5 substitutions, and that they're not weakening that starting 11. It's a really, really interesting place that Stranraer have managed to get themselves into. And as you say, I wouldn't put it past them. I don't think they will get promoted, but I certainly wouldn't be surprised if they did.
Like, see, just imagine that, I suppose, if they're playing, just say the league is finished today, they're in 4th place playing Cove Rangers. Could they relegate Cove Rangers? Absolutely. If they get against Clyde or Spartans, maybe maybe they've beaten these
Mhm.
teams, beaten Spartans at the weekend to ride their luck. But I just thought I was really impressed with the winning goals really as well. Dean Cleland's goal was good as well.
Mhm.
It's Don Plank. Don Plank's turning into a smashing player as well. Somebody is really creative. I like his socks pulled down round his ankles as well, like a total I was going to compare him to George Best there. I really don't want to, but just like I say, clips that ball to the back post, and there's Cleland there. I think not great for Ethan Drysdale, seems to switch off the ball watching, but then he's just there to thumb my header down, and just how you can play on that pitch, because it's not great. It's not conducive to good football. But I suppose when it's not conducive to good football, then all you can do is just really get stuck in. And we saw that time and time again. Like Big Lewis Reed looked like he had a great game for this one. The rest of the defence played well, we touched on there. The forwards all working hard for each other. You could just basically repeat the points that you've made there, but it feels like it's a good fun, quite good fun to be following the Blues at the moment. But as good as it followed the Blues, would you be worried if you were a Spartans fan?
Yeah, a wee bit. So they now have no margin for error. Is that 3 games?
Yeah,
without a win. And as much as they maybe didn't necessarily deserve to lose this game, they also didn't do anywhere near enough to win the match. So that's concerning. I think you could potentially say that about the last couple of games as well. So maybe things are starting to catch up with them. So yes, I agree. Especially when you compare them to how East Kilbride are now playing, because I think, and again we've touched on it throughout this League 2 campaign. I think East Kilbride turn up, play well, then they can absolutely hammer a team. I think Spartans are probably, if they play well, then they probably win. But I think if they drop off slightly, then the opponent has a real good chance. And without going back and checking, I think maybe the only team Spartans have hammered this season is actually East Kilbride.
Yeah.
So I think if there is a wee bit of drop off from Spartans, then they might not get away with it. Whereas I think a lot of East Kilbride's poor results this season have come from, yes, maybe they're not quite at it, but we often talk about East Kilbride just being daft in terms of playing out from the back, where they can't really do it. So if they've eliminated that, then I would be a wee bit worried from a Spartans perspective.
I mean, let's be honest, that East Kilbride performance was absolutely dreadful. I mean, sorry, we're not talking about the Spartans here, but just on East Kilbride, having watched the highlights from their game, touched on it last week, the game against Annan, the game against Dumbarton as well. I mean, for instance, see like Bobby McCluckey's goal at the weekend to open the scoring. That's just a brilliant goal. And the fact, I think, is what the ball... there's times where they can be guilty of possession for the sake of possession, but that goal there, and similar to the goals that they scored against Annan, the ball just worked from back to front, like quite quickly. Not back to front, but it's worked through the pitch. It's worked through the pitch from back to middle to front really quickly. Dumbarton couldn't cut with him, and there's a great ball out wide, and there's McCluckey there between the two centre backs to head her home. And there's McCluckey, who's a player that I think we said last time. I've written him off because I didn't think he was that good at Stenhousemuir. I don't think he had much of an impact at Hamilton. Certainly making an impact now for East Kilbride. I think the thing with the Spartans is they had a big game against Dundee United on Tuesday night there, on a tough pitch as well. The pitch at Tannadice is absolutely stinking, and that, whether you want to admit it or not, that game will have an emotional impact on them, because it's a game that players will psych themselves up for. That's a good chance, especially when Dundee United went down to 10 men quite early on. The Spartans would have had a really good chance to beat them there. So you maybe even, because you've got that chance, you put more into it than you might care to admit. And then
there's a lot of experience, though. Like, there's a lot of experience in that team, so they shouldn't necessarily kind of get caught up in that. I totally agree with where you're coming from, but there's a lot of experience in there.
There's a lot of experience, but I mean, like, for the experienced guys, like, how many of them get the chance to play in a Scottish Cup quarter final?
No, I know.
Not many, not many, if that. And then you're coming out and you're playing on a really heavy pitch, and it's something I quite like. Kevin Watt. First time I actually heard Kevin Watt speak. Actually, I thought he came across really well. He talks so well. in his post match interview. But when the young when the young lady that was interviewing him, God, listen, when the lassie asks him about the pitch, and he just sort of ends up off, she asks him, did the pitch look, and she can't even finish the question. He's like, oh, for the pitch, like it was really dreadful, cut up badly, hard to run. That's 2 games in a row where you've played at away grounds. You've had a long distance to travel for them, and it's a really heavy surfaces. He said the team needed to start quickly. They didn't. They were punished for it. And then you've got a bit of an uphill battle. They got the own goals. I actually feel really sorry for Joe McGrath because the ball deflects onto him, then deflects into the net. So it's really bad. But for all that pressure, they just weren't able to land that telling blow there, and they get done by a sucker punch. So I can sympathise with the Spartans, but as we've said there, they just need to start winning. It's in their hands. That's the thing. Similar to what we said about Cali Thistle there, they win the rest of the games. If the Spartans win every game between now and the end of the season, they will win the league. It's as easy as that. That's easier said than done. But now, as you think from where they were when they had beaten East Kilbride, there's like an 8-point advantage at the top of the table. Now it's gone. They're 5 points behind. Yeah, I'd be concerned. I'd be slightly concerned. But if anyone knows how to try and extricate the team from that situation, it'll be Dougie Samuel. Because if you haven't listened to it, Shaughan and I interviewed him last week. It's a brilliant interview, actually. I was not what I was expecting at all from a football manager. And I'm not just saying that because Shaughan and I were doing it. It is actually really worthwhile listening to, because it's a very, very different perspective on football. Certainly the way he talks about the game isn't like anyone I've heard talk about the game.
Yeah, totally. I suppose we've had the kind of good fortune now to talk to a number of managers. I did think that Dougie Samuel was totally unique, and I mean that in a really good way. Thought it was great to speak to him. Great to spend time with him.
Yeah, definitely. But up next, Shaughan, Stranraer versus Elgin City.
Elgin, a team at least Alan Hale left wasn't cheeky to the person that was interviewing him at the weekend. But that aside, I still think that Stranraer will beat them this Saturday.
Elgin are playing on Tuesday night. They're at home to Edinburgh City, so obviously we don't know what the outcome of that match is, but that's a midweek game. Stranraer have got the time off, a wee bit of time to rest the legs. Elgin playing, so yeah, you would fancy it, especially given the distances involved. This is perhaps the most northerly team in the SPFL, taking on the most... Or it's not the most southerly team. Is it Annan? Certainly one of the most hard to get to places, probably Stranraer, you would say. And then meanwhile, the Spartans are taking on Annan Athletic. Annan they're playing on Tuesday night. They are away at Stirling Albion. They had a pretty... I was going to say keep this as a bonus point about, like, we talked about great goals in League 1. Do you want to talk about some bad goalkeeping in League 2?
There was loads. Absolutely loads. Gio Clark essentially doing the same thing twice. It was essentially a pass back, and then when he came to do the clearance, he clattered it off the advancing forward. But he done
Martin Rennie.
I mean, once is bad. To do it twice was really poor. And then I suppose the other one was Brett Long in the East Kilbride Dumbarton game. I mean, just quite a gentle shot at him, and it just goes through his hands and in the back of the net. I mean, really, like, embarrassing poor.
Yeah, I really bad. So it's watch Willie Gibson's post-match interview, and he's fizzing. Like, just absolutely. I mean, Willie Gibson's always fizzing, to be fair, but he was just like especially annoyed at this because I think that Forfar didn't look as though they created very much, and certainly reading the comments in Pie and Bovril, the fans are quite alarmed at how they played. But there's Forfar, Shaughan, just somehow Forfar now within a whisker of fourth place, so 3 points behind Stranraer. And I suppose that's just the nature of that division. All it takes is a couple of wins and you're suddenly at the table. Because I'm sure, like, just even like last month, you'd have said that Forfar were one of the sides that could have got suckered into the nonsense between Dumbarton and Edinburgh City at the foot of the table. So, do you know my favourite point of Willie Gibson's interview was? Like, the fact that he was suspended for that game, and they essentially said that he felt him being suspended
meant that they were hamstrung going into the game. So I do have to go and kind of look at myself in terms of my behaviour. That's not exactly what he said, but it was roughly along those lines. And I thought to myself, you're 41 years old. I don't know if your behaviours are going to change at all from here on in.
I would say that ship is well and truly sailed. Maybe if you were 15 or 16 and you were getting sent off for mouthing at referees, then there might be a case of that, but that is very, very unlikely to happen. But yeah, hopefully the Spartans can get back on track, because I think it's going to be a very interesting battle at the top of the table, and the games on Tuesday night are huge in determining what might happen, because of course Clyde are playing Dumbarton. We could see a change at the foot of the table. We could see Clyde closing in on the top. A lot to look forward to, but hopefully that doesn't, just because there's games happening that we can't quite cover, it doesn't deter from the fact that I thought that was a good podcast, a worthwhile podcast, and we hope you enjoyed it. But that should probably do us for the time being.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, I don't think you and I have anything else worthwhile to offer the audience, not this week anyway. But just because Shaughan and I are finished, that doesn't mean there isn't tons of world-class content available from the Terrace podcast elsewhere. Remember, sign up to Patreon for as little as £2 per month, because you can access hours and hours and hours of quality football podcasts. Some great stuff dropped over the weekend, but please don't take my word for it. Check it out for yourself. Patreon.com/Terrace podcast. Shaughan, thank you very much.
No, thank you.
And you listening at home, thank you very much. Enjoy your football, but unlike the East Kilbride coach who shouted, "Come on, don't fucking talk back, just pass the fucking ball," and later on, "Stop giving the fucking ball away, fucking stop it, I'm telling you," fucking last warning at John Robertson during East Kilbride's win over Dumbarton at the weekend. Please do so respectfully. Thank you.